All right, we are going to get started. Thank you for your patience. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen. Oh, that's my dog going a little crazy. Don't mind her. um, okay, excellent. Sorry about the disruption here really quickly. Awesome. So I am Sergey from School16. I'm joined here by my brother, partner, and colleague, Vadim Revzin. And again, I'm going to be muting folks as we go along. Sorry about that. Just one second.
If anybody's interested, Sergey's dog's name is Pumpkin, and she's adorable. And if you stay until the very end, you might just get a chance to see what she looks like, unless she jumps up behind him while we're going here. You're muted, Sergey, so just make sure you're...
Yeah, I was just trying to tame that beast that's barking. Vadim, if she starts barking again, just take over for me. So, great. Thank you so much for joining us, folks. We're really excited to introduce Daisy to you in just 1 second. But just wanted to tell you a little bit about ourselves and why we decided to start School16 and what the plans are for the future. I am, again, I'm Sergey. This is my brother, Vadim. We have been in tech for probably about the last 10 years or so, and we've worked across a lot of different roles. Vadim and I both started off in sales, so this conversation around sales is actually near and dear to our hearts, but we have since gone in a lot of different directions, and we think sales is one of those skills that actually has contributed to a lot of the opportunities that we've had in our lives. So I moved on to running sales at a couple of startups and then starting my own software business with my brother. He went more the product management route. We're actually going to have a product expert speak to you guys next Wednesday. And again, School16 is all about giving folks like you exposure to the different roles and opportunities in tech so that you can get into it and level up in these organizations. But we personally, we moved on from jobs in sales to more the venture side. So I'm now on venture capital. I run venture capital investments for the NYU Entrepreneurial Institute. And Vadim, you can mention a few words about yourself.
Yeah, that's right. I am actually also at NYU. I'm a professor there of management and entrepreneurship. And actually part of the reason why we founded School16 is because of our experience in higher education over the last several years. We wanted to bring the best of what we've experienced to you, to people that want access to the types of folks that are in our network. And the best way to learn, I find, is to learn directly from practitioners and people that have actually done what it is you're trying to accomplish, that have actually had experience in navigating their career. School16 is also all about helping you be more entrepreneurial about how you think about your career. You know, whereas before people would get into a job and stay in that job and grow within a company for, you know, their whole career, now it's just simply not the case. It's very normal for somebody not only to switch jobs every few years, but actually to switch careers entirely. Sergey and I have been in finance, we've been in sales, in product sales engineering, we've founded our own companies, now we're in education, and anybody can do the same thing. Anybody can transition to a different career at any point in their life, by the way. It doesn't matter how old you are.
Yep, exactly. Thank you for that, Vadim. And folks, again, you know, these sessions, there's a reason why we decided to author them now. This is our second session that we're running. Every Wednesday, we're going to have a different expert for you at 6 p.m. Eastern. Again, talking about careers in tech, because we want to provide this as a resource for people that are either just starting to explore opportunities in technology and want to figure out how to break in, or have been in tech for some time and want to level up the types of opportunities they see. So again, every weekly session is going to be free, and for folks that are calling in from anywhere, really, regardless of experience, there is really no prerequisite. One thing that we do ask is for folks to fill out a survey at the end. And for anybody that fills out a survey, we will make notes for you available and also the recording of this session for you available. So we're going to drop a link to that survey in the end. But remember, if you want access to notes and to a recording, we will ask that you fill out the survey, because that's the only way that we know that you're here, to be honest. And also, that's the only way that we're able to improve these programs. It's really important for us to make sure that we're delivering something that's valuable to students in these programs. And the only way to do that is for you to fill out the survey, and they only take about a minute. They're really easy to fill out. This is the first thing that we're offering, these free weekly sessions. We are working on creating more programs for you that, again, are all about experiential learning, that will give you access to experts in the field, a little bit more intimate access to folks so you can learn exactly how to get into these careers. So we're going to be rolling out to these. They are going to be application based. So once we have those applications ready to go, probably sometime next week, for more commitment for programs, and more than just one a week. It will be for people that are a little bit more serious and now are committing to getting into a career in tech and learning. We'll let you know about those. So I'm going to share my screen again here so you can see what's going on. And this is the agenda.
Just to add one more thing really quickly, we primarily communicate via email. So just please keep an eye out on emails from me, Vadim, or School16, and that's where we'll be making all of our announcements.
That's right. Somebody just asked if there's going to be a Q&A at the end. We will have time for a Q&A at the end. In fact, you should feel free to drop in questions throughout the conversation. We have questions prepared for Daisy, but you should put in questions in the chat, because we will be looking at the chat. And if there are questions that we think are relevant for the group, we will surface them to Daisy throughout the conversation. So again, this was just the introduction. We'll ask in about a minute for Daisy to give her introduction, and then the rest of it will be a discussion around current opportunities in tech sales and how to accelerate your career in sales. And Daisy has worked in sales in a lot of different technology companies. She has risen through the ranks. She's now head of sales at Google Cloud. And so she has amazing experience. She's hired many people throughout her career. And that's why we wanted to bring her in to talk to you today. So the Q&A that we have prepared for the rest of the time is going to be based on those types of questions. But again, feel free to use that chat to do so. So now enough from me and Vadim for the time being. Again, we'll be monitoring the chat, and we have some questions prepared for Daisy. But Daisy, to kick off this session, just so folks get a little bit of a sense of your experience, can you maybe give us a quick overview of your experience in your career, maybe why you decided to get into sales, and then we'll kick off the conversation from there?
And Sergey, you might need to unmute Daisy if you were doing the mute all function.
It looks like.
There we go.
You?
Great.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Well, thank you. I'm honored to be here. Thank you for the kind introduction. So I guess what I would start with is saying in an encouraging fashion that I'm an example of someone who didn't graduate from college. I went to 2 years of community college, and I worked in a restaurant. And there was a point in my life where I decided I wanted to separate the dollar from the hour. I wanted to be able to make more money than I could based on time. So I started looking around, and I realized that one of my friends had a startup. And I started talking with him about the startup. And this is before email, before the internet. I really didn't understand the internet. I knew nothing about it. So that's how I got into technology. I took a job with that technology startup as an office manager, which were skills I had. I helped him with bookkeeping, I helped him with HR, I helped him with marketing events, and I sort of worked my way into a full-time marketing role. And I would go to trade shows, and I would look at the salespeople, and I would wonder why they couldn't close the deal. And I would wonder why they wouldn't call the leads that were coming in from these marketing activities and close the deal. And it just sort of started me on this journey of understanding what are the mechanics of a sales process? What are the mechanics of convincing someone that there's value in your product, convincing someone that they should see a demonstration and listen to a pitch and you know, see an alignment with your solution and the problem that you're trying to solve for. So that sort of got me pivoted to sales, and I took an inside sales role, and that was 20 years ago. And I did what classic inside salespeople do. You get on the phone and you call people like crazy, and you learn how to pitch and how to position and how to take no for an answer, and just really how to gain talking points that resonate with customers. And then beyond that, I just started moving through sort of a traditional path within companies, which is, can you hit your quotas regularly? Can you pitch the product in a meaningful fashion? Are you persuasive? And sort of all the skills necessary. And then I started to move through a number of startups, and I landed on one. And, you know, to be fair, I got somewhat lucky. I think in life, you need a little bit of luck. Timing is everything. And I was picked up by a company that had a product that turned out to be pretty fantastic. And it ended up going through the motions of going public and then getting acquired by Salesforce in the last year and a half. So I had a tremendous journey with that company toward the latter part of the last 20 years. And then I took some time off. I traveled, got in with another startup, very different than the others I'd done. And within 6 months was acquired by Google. And so here I am. So that's kind of the fast version of my journey from getting out of a community college to finding myself at Google.
I love that. That is a great story, Daisy. You know, and one question that really comes from me for this is, and I'm sure it's on everybody's thought is, you know, you went from a services industry restaurant job to getting into sales. Maybe you had some intuition and natural ability, but how did you convince other people that you were going to be able to do the job well, given that you didn't have experience?
So I knew I didn't have technology experience. So I knew I could not convince them of that, but I knew they could teach me the technology. I knew that I had hustle, I had time management skills, I could communicate fairly effectively, I was persuasive, I could show agility with some situations depending on the topic. So I tried to take skills that I had, that I'd acquired growing up or through college, and position those in a fashion that was attractive for the role I was going after. So early on, those roles were very much about those types of skills. And then over time, I started to put myself in positions where I was taking on projects, volunteering for new responsibilities, and it just sort of, you know, moves you along that path, and that's how you get new titles, new positions, and so forth along the way. So that was that early journey. And to be fair, it was a little bit of luck as well. I had a friend that had a startup. So I had a very clear laser focus on getting out of the restaurant industry into something in technology. I just didn't know what it was. And honestly, in the beginning, I didn't really care, as long as I could learn about how do you use a computer, how do you use these technologies. At that time, it was an email marketing technology. So it was new for sending mass emails, and I learned how to write HTML and you know, be able to sit in front of Ford and design their email marketing campaign. That was exciting for me. I was in London, and you know, I'd never done anything like that before. So putting myself in these positions where I was taking risks and taking on projects that I knew nothing about, and really focusing on gaining skills along the way, and then everything sort of follows if you keep that focus, I think.
That's a really good point. I think a lot of people, and I think admittedly myself as well, have some trepidation when they have to take on a role or responsibility where they have zero exposure or experience, and they think, well, why should I do this since I'm not the one that has any experience in it? But my answer to that is, you should do this because you're the one that wants to do it, and many other people, quite frankly, are not willing to. And just because you didn't do something in the past doesn't mean you can't learn, and you can't learn quickly. And I have a follow-up question to that, but the other thing I wanted to call out and mention is, you know, you said you had a friend that had a startup. I think everybody should have that lens, though, when they're looking for the next opportunity. Use whatever you can to your advantage. I actually got into sales in a very similar way. I had a cousin that had his own startup, and they just raised a small round of about $400,000, and I worked for them for free as well, right? And it's actually, I know a lot of people think, I want to get a job in big tech, I want to get a job at Google or Facebook, but one of the best ways to do that is to get experience at a smaller company. And you never know if that small company is going to end up getting acquired by that bigger company as well. So I would put more weight into the leaders of a smaller company. If you trust them, then hopefully there'll be a positive event from that. But the follow-up question that I had for you, Daisy, is you mentioned that one of the important pieces of your journey was volunteering for certain opportunities. I did that by doing free sales work for my friend. But can you talk about maybe some specific examples of when you volunteered for an opportunity when you didn't necessarily have any experience, and how that directly translated into personal growth for you?
Yeah, so before I started working for a startup, when I still worked in restaurants, I had a friend who had a company that built websites for people looking for jobs in Alaska. And he wanted to build a database. And I didn't know anything about databases, but I explained to him that I was very good with repetitive activities. I was very focused. I was very dependable. I was very honest. I could work independently. I needed very little direction. So he ended up giving me a project to help determine what he would store that data in and how he would access it with those websites. So even though I didn't have any tech background, he was able to explain to me in pretty short sessions how to do that. I didn't know anything about writing a query. I didn't know anything about data or how it's stored or why it's meaningful to put it in columns versus rows or any of the things you learn as you work with some of these projects along the way. But he just recognized that this was someone that was willing to learn. He took some time. He helped me understand the basics, and then he gave me the project and I ran with it. So that was sort of the first project I ever did. And then I referenced that project and he gave me a reference. So every time I would go for an interview or try to do something else, he became a great reference point for me for that early project, for all those skills that I mentioned. And then you build on that and you build on that for the next project. When I finally did get that job in the startup that I mentioned, even though I was the office manager, I made myself available to every department. So I got to know everybody in the company. It was a 75-person company. So I knew all the department heads. So every time that they had a project, I tried to volunteer for those projects, even on the simplest tasks, just so I could get in the room. Because once you're in the room, you're part of the team. And the more you're part of the team and the more that you show you have capacity, they'll give you more responsibilities. If you're dependable and you come through on time, and they'll want to teach you whatever those skills are. Most of us in our careers, we love passing on technology. We love passing on skills. We love to help mentor people, but we need those people to kind of grab the bit and run with it, right? We can't give them 100% of our time, but I could give you 5% just to get you started, right? And so you look for opportunities like that. And I think for me, I tried to broaden my lens, as you said, to make that aperture as wide as possible. So I had as many chances as I could get. And as I mentioned, I went into marketing first. That was my first opportunity, but I sort of knew that wasn't my path. I knew that I wanted to be in sales. I knew I wanted to make a lot of money. I knew I wanted to be in charge. I wanted to be running demos. I wanted to be closing deals. I wanted to see my name up on the board. You know, all the things that you sort of recognize in yourself, you start to gauge and align yourself with those paths. And that's how I tried to do that.
Interesting. Yeah. And I mean, look, salespeople, they are money motivated, and that's okay. As a matter of fact, if you're a salesperson and you don't care about money, you probably won't last in
The wrong
sales too long.
Yeah.
But one thing you mentioned earlier on, and I kind of want to shift gears a little bit with this question, is that when you were observing people in sales, you were wondering, why aren't they closing deals? And that kind of, I guess, incentivized you or motivated you to dig into the process as a whole. But to me, it sounds like you also were pretty natural at sales. Obviously, you had other skills as well. That's why you were able to take on more technical responsibilities, marketing responsibilities, and the like. But it seems like you were a pretty natural salesperson. I remember when I had my first job in sales, first of all, I was awful, and it took me some time to get better. But I also remember noticing over and over again that every time we hired a new salesperson, I wasn't very good at judging when somebody would be good, because oftentimes they didn't seem like they're naturally good, but then they kind of grew into that role. So obviously you've hired a lot of salespeople yourself. Can you talk about how you look at candidates that don't have a lot of direct sales experience, and how you evaluate someone that might not look like they're good or that they're a natural salesperson? And even if it matters if someone's a quote unquote natural salesperson in terms of them being successful in that role.
So I don't know if this is the normal way that people do it, but I can tell you my way. I really look for soft skills and I look for attributes. So what I'm looking for are things like tenacity, agility, what's your intentional ability in situations where you feel high stress, you're overwhelmed by the details? Do you dig in and you try and figure it out and you marshal resources and you collaborate, or do you shut down? You know, I started to look for scenarios where I try to pull out of people examples or situations where they've figured out how to get the result they were looking for, right? First and foremost, if you're not the person in your group of friends, this is a good test. If you're the person in your group of friends that's constantly the one trying to persuade people to do something, you are a natural seller. You're the one that's trying to convince them where to go skiing. You're the one that's trying to convince them of what restaurant to go to. You're the one that's trying to convince them of their 401k. Like whatever it is, salespeople are just naturally persuasive. It doesn't matter what the topic is. We just sort of can't help ourselves. It's in our DNA, right? So that's sort of a founding building block I look for in people is when I'm sitting across from them in an interview, are they persuading me of anything? It doesn't matter what the topic is. If it's their favorite movie, if it's what they're doing on the weekend, do they bring passion and do they bring, you know, a good storytelling and emotion to what they're trying to convince me of? I mentioned agility early. It's super important that you can follow along. If I'm moving the conversation in directions, you're able to come back to a question, answer the previous one, move to the third lane and the fifth lane and the sixth base. That's really important in a sales opportunity because a lot of times things are coming at you in different ways. So when I worked in the restaurant, I learned how to manage my time, how to manage lots of things moving around you, how to keep things on that I didn't have control over. I couldn't control the food coming out of the kitchen. But if I timed it right, and if I worked it right, and if I opened that bottle of wine now, and if I grabbed 5 things off the floor at the same time versus going to one table, you start to work through those time management and agility situations where you have a angry customer, the food's cold, something's in their drink, whatever that is. You bring those skills into it. If you can have a conversation about those types of soft selling attributes, then I'm interested. I'm actually way more interested if you're able to communicate those types of things about yourself than if you just show me a resume that you've had 5 different sales jobs. Because sometimes when I look at a resume where you've had 5 different sales jobs, I kind of wonder why you haven't been very successful, right? And why you haven't stuck around at those 5 different jobs. What exactly are you looking for? And if you don't know that yourself, how do I help you if you don't know that yourself, right? So that's sort of what's going through my mind as I interview people. You'll hear there's some books. Angela Duckworth wrote a really good book called Grit. And it became famous because the Seattle Seahawks followed the program when they won the Super Bowl. And she talks about how you need to look for these types of attributes in people. And it doesn't matter who you are, what you do. And we're seeing that in spades right now with the healthcare community as they work through this coronavirus. They have grit. They're sticking with it. They're getting to the goal, not giving up. They're going to work in unbelievable circumstances. So you look for those types of perseverance, empathy for the customer. All of those attributes I think are fantastic. Some of the best people I've ever hired have been bartenders, have been recruiters, have been managers of a ferry boat. You know, it's not cookie cutter. It comes down to the individual skills and the attributes for me, from what I've seen.
I love that. And, you know, to maybe even back up before you get a chance to interact with someone in an interview. I mean, let's say you got a resume from, you know, a ferry boat manager, right? I mean, would that person realistically get a chance to get in front of you? Maybe you can tell us a story about a time when someone that on paper didn't quite make sense, you gave an opportunity to. And for folks listening on the call, you know, I'm sure, especially a place like Google, which is like a very data-driven place, of course, you worry that your resume and cover letter is just going to go in some computer database that's never going to get looked at. So how do you stand out in front of someone like Daisy?
Yeah, so it's difficult, right? Because even at Google, I don't even see those resumes until they've gone through recruiting waves of people that look at them, right? The hiring managers get them at the sort of end goal. We're given a stack of them that have been filtered. So navigating your network is probably one of the best ways. Understanding who's connected to whom. LinkedIn is fantastic for it. Almost everyone in the world is like 2 or 3 degrees separated from everyone else, right? So if you don't have a LinkedIn profile that you've been adding to and building, you need to do that. You need to get a professional photo up. You need to start making connections. It's really important when you work with people to get them to write recommendations for you. So if I get a resume, the first thing I do is I go to LinkedIn and see if anybody agrees. Does anybody agree with all these things that they're saying about themselves on the resume? Has anybody stood up on LinkedIn and written a public testimonial? Those sorts of things. Also, there's a trick that recruiters use. I don't know if a lot of people know this. They read resumes horizontally and vertically. So the first thing a lot of them do is they read vertically. So they'll read the first word of every kind of bullet or paragraph that you've written on your resume. And a lot of times those are not aligned with the job you want. They could be passive words, or they're not aligned with what you're trying to convey, right? Are you a manager, or are you coaching people? Are you assessing people? Are you commanding people, or are you coaching and sort of supporting your teams, to get to their goals? So word choice really, really matters. Those are just quick tips on how to kind of stand out. And then get creative. I just, before AppSheet was purchased by Google, I was in the late stages of hiring an Army helicopter pilot. The guy was fantastic. He was so creative. He was so determined. Because he's getting out of the military, he can't go back. He has to get a job. And he decided he wanted to get a job in sales, and he worked it. He learned about Salesforce. He made sure I knew all of the investment that he's made in what he was able to learn in that time frame between when he's getting out. So those things are impressive because that shows individualism, tenacity. Not only that, but I can't tell you how many times people don't use product of the company they want to work for before they start having conversations. So it's super key if you're trying to get into technology company, use their product, download it, build something, get into the user community, figure out what is it about these products that gets people excited, and how can you build your own prototype and really learn how to pitch it and how to talk to that person, if it's a recruiter or someone like myself, in a meaningful manner, right? That's super important. And so as an example, this airline pilot, helicopter pilot, he built an application using AppSheet to show in the military, they get these lists of things they have to go check on, right? To make sure that the equipment's still there. So he built an application using AppSheet with no experience that they could use to go check on those items, right? And this is millions and millions of dollars it would save the Army if he was able to convince them to pitch that. So that's an example where he was taking the initiative. It was really impressive what he was able to do.
I love that. And I want to highlight something. And I think it's easy for people oftentimes when you hear certain advice to dismiss it as like, oh, that's obvious. But like people miss oftentimes like stuff like make sure your LinkedIn is updated and you have recommendations and you're building a network there, and customizing your resume and cover letter for the opportunity so that people can figure out the pattern, make sure do you make sense for this role, even if your experience is different, right? Like these are simple things, but most people don't do them. They hear it, they're like, yeah, that's obvious. And then they just don't do it because they dismiss it. So pay attention to these little techniques that Daisy's mentioning because they're critical, very critical. But I know Vadim,
there's one that people do often, which I think is they should be doing the reverse, which is in their cover letter, they'll talk about me. They'll have researched me, or they'll have said something about my career, and they'll talk about me, and they won't talk about themselves. And so I'll read the whole cover letter and I'll learn nothing about them, which I think is a missed opportunity, right? Because you want to highlight what's the most important thing I should learn from you if I don't even look at your resume, if I'm only going to read that cover letter. So you don't want to miss that opportunity.
Exactly. And a lot of people will put like generic stuff like I'm a team player and I'm a et cetera. And that's great. You're telling me that you are, but where's the proof? To give me a story that shows why, gives me evidence that you're that person, right?
That's exactly right. Storytelling captures people's attention. It captures their imagination. If you never told me anything about your background, but told me a story about a win that you had in your life, it doesn't even have to be a technology win. It's just something where you did something amazing that would capture my attention in a big way.
Yeah, the other thing I want to highlight that you mentioned is, with that helicopter pilot, he did something that one would think a salesperson inherently doesn't have to know how to do. He built an application. But the
Yeah.
thing is, the most successful salespeople I found are the ones that have an intimate understanding of the product. That's probably why you said study the product before you actually apply to the company. And if you do have an intimate understanding of the product, guess what? You will be put into a better position to succeed. You'll be put into more of a cross-functional role. You'll get exposure to executives and people in product and technical roles and the like. And again, that secures you in that role too, because those types of people that understand things cross-functionally are actually very hard to find. So don't think just because you're looking for an opportunity in sales that you just have to be good at sales. There's a lot of things that can be added to your toolbox that can actually make you much more effective.
Yeah, do you know what he actually said to me? He said, Daisy, if you can't trust me with a quota and the government trusts me with a multi-million-dollar piece of equipment, which is a helicopter, then I'm not doing my job. Which is so true, right? He has all this experience and he has knowledge about the military, which I don't know anything about. So he did a good job educating me and making me believe that he could do that work. If we put that training in front of him, he would master that.
Sounds like he was very persuasive. I can see why you ended up hiring him.
And that's one of many. That's one of many examples, right?
Of course, I'm sure. And by the way, folks, you can start filtering in more questions as we're going along here. But I have via the chat. But I have another question for you now. You know, sales can mean a lot of different things. I mean, you go from door-to-door sales, Arthur Miller, right? Death of a Salesman. You have transactional phone sales. You have enterprise sales where you're working for 6 months to a year, working with one company or a small amount of companies trying to close a deal by talking to everybody in different departments and figuring out who owns the budget, who the different stakeholders are and the like. And then you have sales like I was doing, where literally I had to do 80, 90 cold calls a day, and I was closing 1 to 3 deals a week, right? Which is a lot more transactional. Can you talk about the different sales roles and maybe even what types of personalities fit those various roles? Or is it more so you're good at sales, you can probably take on any kind of role?
Yeah, and to sort of even more clarify Vadim's question, I think it'd be really helpful to hear about, you know, sales roles that you see are important today, maybe versus before, for people that are trying to get in.
Yep. So there's kind of a natural split in sales. You have SMB, mid-market, and enterprise, if you think of those as segmentations. And depending on the product that you're selling, you usually don't do all three. You might have one or two, or maybe all three. And depends on what point in your career you want to enter into sales. But if you're entering early, and by early, I mean you have a limited time on the market, maybe you did an internship or you have 1 or 2 years under your belt, you probably want to go into a type of sales where you get wins so that you understand how to work through an entire sales process. I think there's a lot of value in that. And it also feeds your soul to keep taking down customers, to get into different situations, to learn how to pitch to different industries, different types of people up and down an organization. And so I usually encourage people to try and get into some kind of commercial sales organization where you're doing lots of transactions. We call them at-bats. So you get lots of at-bats. You can hit grounders, you can hit home runs. Every now and then you just get a lot of deals under your belt. That's usually what I tell people is the best way to get into sales. The other alternative is you go in at an enterprise level and you decide, you know what, I don't think I want to do those transactions. I want to get in at a higher level. I really want to do those big deals. I want to go into enterprise selling. I want to have a 6 month to 18-month sales cycle. I want to be doing big deals. I want to make big money. That's great. We love those people. In fact, I manage a whole team of those people right now. And it just takes a different skill set, right? You have to elevate your communication style. You've got to do a lot more prep. You have to handle more meetings and be traveling more. You don't really do as much selling over the web as you would in a commercial sales role. So some of it you have to align it with your personal goals. Some of it you have to determine, where do I want to place myself? And then, you know, depending on how persuasive you are, or maybe where you went to college, you might be able to get into that as an entry role, or you might have to work your way into it. So for instance, if I was targeting an enterprise role, the first thing I would do if I didn't have the experience is I would just go in at a kind of SDR level, where I'm supporting an SDR. As an SDR, I'm supporting an enterprise rep. So I'm the right-hand person, I handle everything for them, and then they in turn start training me to become an enterprise rep. So I put myself in that position. I'm in the room, right? I'm on the team. the reverse of that is I go in and I just get a commercial job, right, on a sales team. And sometimes it's with a startup. I love startups. I love being 1 or 2, 3, 4 people on a sales team because we get to build documentation, build process, which has its own challenges, as you guys know. But that's fun to me. I love that. It's exciting. We get to try things. We build decks, we build prototypes and things like that. So it depends on what size company you want to go into and the product that you want to represent. Early in your career, I would encourage you though to really move around a little bit. Like you want to be at a company somewhere between 18 months to 2 years and then move to the next one, because what you really need to do is understand how different technology companies run sales teams, how they run plays, how they commission, how they do product development, how they go to market. That's really important for you to get those foundational elements. And then when the time comes where you get that one job that you absolutely love, then you stay there for 5, 8, 10 years and make your mark.
That makes a lot of sense. And one question that I had is I know there's a fair amount of folks that are on the call that may have had sales experience in a completely different industry, and now they're trying to transition into tech. Are there any thoughts that you have, in particular, if you've been in sales for 10, 15, 20 years in a completely different industry, how do you increase your likelihood to be able to make that transition?
Yeah, so I'll give you an example. When I took time off, I actually thought about going into the movie business. I'd always had a desire to go make movies. I love storytelling. I love the idea of being around production. And so I started going through those exercises that you're probably referring to, which is how do I get into the movie industry? Who do I know? Who can I volunteer for? Is there anything local happening? Is there somebody I know that can get me on as an extra? Not that I want to be on camera, but I'll just get on site, right? I started reading scripts. I started reading books about making movies. I started watching videos about making movies. So some of it's just the prep that you do to try and position yourself. Because when that moment happens where you have a conversation, you better be ready for it, because you don't get very many of those, right? So that's the first thing I would say is if you're making a transition into technology, figure out where in technology you want to fit, right? So like, I don't want to go into animation. So I don't want to be making movies about Halo as an example. So I'm not going to learn about, that side of the business. I'm going to go into more of the storytelling kind of movie making side. Then I put myself in that position and I start to learn about that. So depending, because technology has layers just like the movie industry does, or if you're going into healthcare or so forth. You just want to align yourself with some slice of that industry so you can focus, because it's too big to focus on everything. And for me, what I was always trying to do, and I'll just give you a piece of advice, I always looked for disruptive technologies. So I'll give you an example. When I took time off after Tableau, I said, I want another company that's doing something that's new, that people don't quite know about yet. And so I immediately started looking into cyber technology. I looked into no-code technologies, because I knew that no-code was like a new wave of technology that people were coming out with, right? And it's actually been around for a little bit over a decade. You look for buzzwords like that when you're trying to understand, what are those buzzwords? What do they mean? Can I latch onto this? Is this something I can get passionate about, right? And so once I started learning about no-code, then I started learning about mobile. And once I started learning about mobile, I started learning about, oh, this is how devices work, and this is how networks work, and this is what they're thinking about, and this is what's meaningful to them. And then I started kind of going through the motions, and it just so happened I had a friend that worked at a startup, and he brought me in, and that's how I got the job at AppSheet just before I went to Google. So again, here I am moving into kind of a new area for me in technology. I didn't really know anything about mobile. And that was exciting to me to go into something that feels a little bit familiar because it's still working with data, but it's a brand new area of technology. So if you're coming from outside of technology, you have to do a little bit more homework, right? Because I already had a background a little bit in working with data, having been at Tableau. I knew a lot about databases. I knew a lot about analytics. What I didn't know was that mobile piece. And that's what I've been learning about for the last 6 to 9 months, and every day really since then.
I love that. I'll mention
Oh, Vadim, did you cut out here? I don't know if you guys are seeing Vadim. It looks like he cut out. But one thing I want to highlight that Daisy said, which is especially if you're transitioning from another industry, it's so important for you to be able to communicate what you actually want and not to take that for granted. You know, a lot of people don't spend the time thinking about what do I want, what kind of role, what kind of company, what kind of product even. And you know, if you're just thinking, well, I want any job in tech, that's not enough. You're not going to convince anyone that you should be the one that gets that job if you're that broad. So thinking about researching different industries, finding out where you just have natural interest, you know. And if you're, for example, if you've been doing sales and hospitality for the last 15 years, maybe you look for tech startups that are in the hospitality space because they're going to value your expertise, even if you don't have that tech expertise. So knowing what you want is really critical because that will translate in the interviews and in the entire process. But Vadim, you cut out, but what were you going to say?
Yeah, I was just going to add that, you know, there's a few cool things that a sales background gives you. One, you can join a different company really whenever you want with a different area of focus. So if you get bored with one industry, as long as you have some skills and experience that can transfer to that other industry, as long as you can adjust your narrative to show why you're valuable to that industry, you can learn brand new things. Like you just got into mobile because that's what excites you now, you know, right after you tried to transition into the entertainment business. If you decide you want to do that, you can do it at any time because you have that skill. And that kind of takes me to the other point where, aside from transitioning industries and doing sales in different industries and learning new things, you can also oftentimes pick up roles in completely different jobs. You can become a product manager, by the way, if you did technical sales and you are more technical than your other sales counterparts. You can go into operations or you know, other types of roles, maybe where you have a leadership responsibilities, right? If you were a salesperson that also ended up managing other people. So getting sales experience oftentimes, especially early on in your career, can set you up and open doors to completely different careers as well. And Sergey and I often say that we think everybody should get experience in sales because it can really help make you be more versatile as a candidate to other roles.
And so I want to ask a question, Daisy, that's coming in from the audience here. There was actually two questions that I think are related. Obviously, right now we're in a pretty unique time economically, and there's going to be implications across a lot of different industries. We're a little biased. We happen to think tech is going to bounce back the fastest, and a lot of tech companies are still hiring and will continue to hire. But you know, given the current crisis and given the fact that there may be cuts, there may be hiring freezes, are you seeing from your perspective, are there certain jobs that you think are still quite secure? And then I have a follow-up question after you answer that one.
Yeah, I think that depends on the industry. That's a good question. So you'd have to look by industry. In the tech industry, we've actually been a little bit insulated from that. Most of the companies I know are still hiring. But, you know, to be fair, some of the companies are getting hit hard, right? If people pull back their ad spending, if people pull back their, you know, ordering lunches for their teams every day. Like in Seattle, our South Lake Union area where most of the tech companies are, Apple, Google, all the others, nothing is happening down there because everyone's working from home. So, you know, those types of industries are definitely getting impacted, but I think tech's a little bit insulated because it's really easy for all of us to work from home. For me, that's actually one of the reasons I think, as I mentioned before, I love tech because people in technology have agility. They have agility not only in their fluidity across different types of technology or companies or learning new things every day. They also have fluidity across these different types of situations where, you know, we had to buy some laptops for folks that didn't have portable laptops at Google. Our team did that within days and had them set up at home. Like they just operate that way. They're very mobile, very intensively responsive. So you want to align yourself with companies that have that sort of agility, because then you're going to have the confidence that when you're working for these companies, they're actually going to be able to navigate whatever's coming. As you all know, what just happened to the world, unfortunately, could happen again. So aligning yourself with technologies that can navigate that future and what that looks like is super important. You're going to see a lot of money go into biotech. You're going to see a lot of money go into developing vaccines and making mobile hospitals and, getting people enabled with mobile technologies, everything's going to become more fluid and more available than it has been before, and not so locked down.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd really think about that if you're working with companies that are still sort of command control oriented. Like there's some companies that are still making people go to the office. That just seems crazy to me, given all the technologies that are available in the world right now. And so I think you're going to see more and more of that. I think immediately it's too hard to tell what the impact is until we see the next couple months.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And for the benefit of the folks that are on the call that maybe don't have a lot of experience, like one person asked about how do you get internships during this time, but like what are some of those more entry level types of titles that you should be looking for as someone now just starting to get into tech sales that that may take a chance on you even if you don't have a lot of experience?
Yeah, so SDRs, any inside sales team, is really easy to get hired for, because generally speaking, those jobs are hard. They're some of the hardest jobs in a sales team. And so they tend to rotate through people quickly. Sometimes it's because people go to other organizations or they just get promoted right into their sales team.
Yeah, so sales development roles, more like the
Sales
lead
development
generation
roles.
Okay.
Yeah, where you're literally picking up the phone, dialing for dollars, right? And generally the companies have better technology than just the phone book, right? Got, tools and resources for you to navigate and find those prospects. So that's important. For the internships, I generally tell people, figure out what type of work you want to do. That's important. And then just look in your community. Everybody has a CEO friend or parents or someone, especially if you've gone to school, you have a bigger community as well. And really ask people to do a favor for you, right? I think to your point, one of the problems that people have sometimes is they'll say to me, I'm willing to do anything. And in the moment, I can't quite think of what that should be. And so I'll sometimes say, okay, let me think about it, and I'll go away. And then I get busy with 5,000 other things that I have on my plate. So just make sure you're very intentional for the type of internship you want to do. And again, I would go back to, what skill are you trying to gain? So anytime I mentor people, I always tell them, you're going to come out of this with some skill that you're interested in. Okay, so I'm not just going to mentor you because you want to be mentored. You have to tell me what is it you're trying to learn, and then I can tell you if I can help you with that skill. I always have 3 mentors at any given time. I have a mentor in my company, so someone that I respect, that I want to help me navigate the company. I usually have a mentor outside the company, so sometimes I'll pick a teacher, someone that's really good with presenting and persuading and motivating people, which is key to sales, and they offer me a different perspective. And then the third mentorship is usually something I'm trying to gain a skill on. If I'm trying to get better at presenting, if I'm trying to get better at handling conflict resolution, if I'm trying to get better at positioning pricing or thinking creatively, or trying to get better at managing my calendar, whatever it is, I'm very, very laser focused on what's the skill I'm going to gain. And then I try to have mentorships for short periods of time so we can both hold each other accountable to getting to the goal. Because if you let it unwind, what happens is you just end up meeting for coffee and you don't really meet your goals, which is great. I love having coffee with people, but it doesn't really accomplish the goal.
No, you're absolutely right. And usually if you want somebody to mentor you, they're probably a busy person. And so they are going to spend time with you if they can provide value. So you have to tell them how they'll provide value for you. What are you trying to get out of the relationship? How, setting the pace for what that relationship is going to be like. A lot of people take that for granted.
That's right.
You're absolutely right. Something also that I want to ask, and there's a couple of questions coming in the chat, and I want people to continue asking questions in the chat because we're picking the ones that we think are relevant. But one thing is, maybe you can speak to your own experience, or maybe folks that you've hired before. But what are some things that you have done that maybe other people don't do in a sales job or in a company that you think helped you get leadership opportunities? Because not everybody gets leadership opportunities.
That's true. I think you don't create leaders, you find leaders. And what I mean by that is there are already people that know their leaders in their groups. There are people that always help. There are people that volunteer. There are people that coach. There are people that always do the right thing, right? even if the situation means it's not in their benefit. They seem to always take the right path. Those are the leaders in organizations, and you notice them when you see them. I try to align with that, right? Through just day-to-day work. The other thing I try to do is build. So a lot of times when you're in an organization, if you see a problem, instead of pointing it out, go try and solve for it, or at least come up with an idea. And then when you go mention that problem, give 3 or 4 ideas for how you think it could be solved. Even the process of doing that demonstrates that you're trying to be outcome oriented. So one of the things I've always tried to do in my career is speak the language of outcomes. And what I mean by that is I'm going to present something to you or have a conversation with you based on the outcome that I want or the desire I'm looking for. I'm not just going to have a conversation with you about the things that are missing or the negative space, right? And the more that you do that, and don't get me wrong, we can all have our cranky conversations, but the more you do that, you start to be seen as somebody who can think strategically or thinks ahead or tries to be on the solution side of the conversation or equation every time. And that's really important at every level, because then that starts to bubble throughout the organization and you start to get invited into the room. And once you're invited in the room, you start to get responsibility. And the more responsibility you take on, the more capacity that you're given. I always tell people, don't ever chase a title, chase the work. What's the work that you want to do? You will always get the title, you will always get the money, provided you're a good negotiator, and that's a different topic. But always look for what work do you want to be doing, right? If you want to be a VP, what do you want to be a VP of? What work do you want to do every day? What do you imagine VPs do every day? If you don't know, go shadow one. Get someone in your community that's a VP and go shadow them for the day and see if you want to do that work, right? And that'll tell you a lot about whether that goal is in line with what your goals are.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. And, I think some people, especially less experienced people, take for granted the fact that, you have to take it into your own hands to make sure that your output and your outcomes driven thinking is noticed, right? Like people don't, especially if you're part of a big team, like there's a reason why certain people rise through the ranks and others don't. Like the people that are proactive about seeking that mentorship, building those relationships with other leaders, asking them, what it takes to succeed, and then making sure that they notice when you do things that you think they should notice, like make it be known. And that means, even things like emailing your boss or emailing another manager or slacking people about like a success or win that you had. Like these things add up and people will notice when you make yourself noticeable. And I don't want people to take that for granted. So you're absolutely right. One question that came through the chat and is that, especially if you don't have experience, I guess it might be easy to say, well, you have to know what you want. We talked about that a couple of minutes ago. But for some folks, you might not know, you don't know what you don't know. And it's hard to know what you want, for lack of a better description. Do you have any advice on how someone can educate themselves early on in their process of figuring out where in sales they should go or industries that they should enter? What's an easier or relatively fast way that you can educate yourself that can help you figure out what to want or what job to get into?
Yeah, so a starting point I would use if I was giving you advice and we had sort of a conversation about it is, what's your passion? And let's assume you told me your passion was music. Then I would say, okay, why don't we focus on getting you a job at a music company that's technology focused? And then we would go down the path of figuring out what those companies are. Is it Pandora or is it something similar, right? And then we talk about, well, what kind of roles do they have in the company and do that research. So that's sort of a quick and dirty way of how to do it, right? The other thing I try to get people to focus on or visualize is when they see people and they see successful people and they imagine where they want to be, who is that person, right? When they think about a career that's successful, who are they thinking about? Are they thinking about an actor? Are they thinking about a doctor? Are they thinking about an IT person? They love being around servers. They love being around data. Those are just exploratory questions where I'm trying to figure out, where do I put you on the spectrum of industry? Where do I put you on the spectrum of job titles? Or where do I put you on the spectrum of the type of work you want to do every day? And I can get at that through what you do with your spare time, right? So if you're a gamer, If I give you the day off, what do you go do? Do you go lay on the couch and play games? That's okay. Let's go get you a job in the gaming company, right? You're passionate about games. That's fantastic. Right? I have a friend that works at Xbox. Let's get you an informational interview with her. You know, those types of conversations start to sort of follow a pattern. So first I would say, focus on what you're passionate about, and then combine it with those skills that I mentioned that you have today without even learning anything new. How can I form an idea of the type of job role that you could potentially get into? And then you sort of navigate from there. And to your point early on, the first job you get is never the first job you keep. I don't know anybody that stays at a job for 30 years anymore.
Yeah.
Right? So don't worry too much about that. The first job you take, it might be great, it might be terrible. It doesn't matter. You do it for 6 months to a year, learn what you can, focus on what skills you can gain, and then you move on. You've got that reference, and now you move on to the next job. And you'll notice throughout your career, every time you leave a job, you make a little bit more money, you get a little bit more street cred, you have a better logo on your resume, you just kind of start to weave that storyline through your efforts.
What would you say to someone that asked you, well, how do I avoid looking like a job hopper? I mean, you even mentioned, hey, like if I see a resume that you had 6 sales jobs in the last 5 years, it seems like you're not succeeding in them. I mean,
depends on how you spin that story.
Yeah. Have
right?
you had someone spin that in a successful way, or maybe not spin, but actually give a great explanation for why that was the case?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes that's due to acquisitions. Sometimes things happen in a company that's outside of your control. So you want to have that narrative figured out when you're talking to someone. I will tell you, most of the time I'm looking for positive experiences and positive outcomes. So even if you do move around a little bit, if you're talking to me about what you gained and why you did that and it was intentional, that's a very different conversation than if you explain to me what went wrong and why you kept moving through those businesses. So that matters. I think someone just asked a great question. Someone said, what can young adults do at home to get ahead? Things like this. There's lots of online courses. There's lots of books out there that you can read about. You know, I've put people through mock interviews to help them prepare for interviews, real interviews that they have. So there's people in your network that can really help you. You just have to get specific with them about what exactly you want them to do, right? So if I wanted Vadim to teach me a software program, I give him very specific time frame and say, I want to learn JSON in 6 months. Is that crazy, or could I do that? And could you help me with that? You know, just get intentional about what that is, and you'd be surprised how many people are willing to help you to accomplish those things.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a thread that stood out for me throughout this conversation is people that show that they have an ability to self-educate, even if they don't have experience, they will get opportunities. Again, because it shows initiative. Initiative, I think, is a key word here. If you don't have experience, how can you prove to someone that you have initiative? And I think we touched on a lot of different ways to do that today, Daisy. And I think you're a perfect example of doing that, because you start off your sales career, by showing initiative, and then you continue to do that in the organizations that you were at, which gave you those leadership opportunities, to your point.
Yeah, and let me give you another example. What you can do now. So appsheet.com, so appsheet.com, which is a company that I worked for that was acquired by Google. We're currently offering our enterprise platform. Yep, that's perfect. It's in the chat window if everyone can see it. We're currently offering our enterprise platform for free to COVID situations. So I'll give you an example. So we're currently creating an application for the state of New York so they could manage beds, hospital beds, and equipment using our platform. And we're doing that in tandem with them, but anyone could be doing that right now. You could get it on our community page, on the appsheet.com community page, on the blog, and you as an individual could get in there and volunteer to help people in the community build applications to help with these types of activities. Almost every technology company of any size is doing free software for COVID. And so if you're at home right now, this is the amazing opportunity for you to be able to get access to free software and help these colleges, help these hospitals, help these neighborhoods, help older people get food and groceries. You know, you could build applications that could help organize all of that. And that'd be a fantastic project for you to talk about after this situation as a volunteer project, as an example. You would learn a lot. You'd learn a lot about process management, about data, about building an application and having to go pitch it and sell it and get people to pay attention to it, or work with technology professionals and navigate those resources and work independently. That's a perfect project if you're looking for one. Just to put a pitch out there for you.
That's great. Always be selling.
Exactly.
But I also think that there's a few important things here that you mentioned. Don't underestimate the value of activities like this. You know, it actually can go a very long way. For example, when I was looking for my second sales job, one of the things that I did is I found the CEO at an event, and he was tabling at the event, pitching his product. And I told him, hey, I've been selling to small businesses for the last 10 months. I think I can do this for you as well. I only had 10 months of experience, but he still got me the interview and I got hired. You know, when I was interested in product management, because I started my own sales software company and because I had to manage an engineer and build a product from scratch, I got a ton of product management interviews, not because I had experience as a product manager, but because I've had experience building my own product. So these different things can actually go a long way, and don't be afraid that you don't have enough experience doing something. Okay, just putting that initiative alone will help you stand out from other people. And you talked about learning JSON. You know, when I was becoming more technical, for example, I would hack around with WordPress, right? Like, for example, I learned WordPress and I built my own website with that. That was enough experience for me to be able to do that for somebody else. I didn't have to get hired for it, but I could speak intelligently about that. So these seemingly little things can actually go a long way. And one quick comment to address what Julia asked earlier, you know, which is what else is good to review besides the company prior to the interview. Daisy talked about this earlier, where you can dive really deep into the product. But the other thing you could do, you know, you mentioned shadowing people. One way that I've gotten interviews is finding people that are within that company that are either unrelated or not the hiring manager and asking to jump on the phone with them. Oftentimes people are more than willing to be seen as an expert and to offer their advice. And they'll tell you exactly what to do to get your foot in the door. And oftentimes they will go ahead and then make the introduction. And there you go. You just got a warm referral into a company. So that's another thing that you can do to go the extra mile, is actually talk to people within that company that can hopefully make an introduction for you. At the very least, they'll give you insight into how that company works.
Yeah, I'm a visual learner and I also learn better audio wise. So I have to see something. Even if you tell me on paper how to do something, I have to see it in action. So I love shadowing. So any opportunity you have to shadow someone doing the job that you want, go shadow them, ask them to do that. I was shocked how many people didn't ask to shadow. When I worked at Tableau, we were always willing to let people come in and shadow our sales reps just so they could get a feel for the job if they were in the interview process. I was always astounded how many people never asked to do that before they took the job. And that's a key moment if organizations are willing to let you do that, so that you can see what does a day in the life look like for that particular role, and will I want to do that, right? So that's another opportunity, is if everyone's working at home right now, is there an opportunity for you to join a sales call with someone that you know that's selling? That would be fantastic.
I love that. I think because a lot of people think it's a black box, but how do you get an opportunity to shadow somebody? How do you get an opportunity to get on the phone with somebody that works for the company? Well, we just gave you the answer. You just ask. It's actually pretty easy. Now, you have to be respectful. You have to maybe give them a little bit of nuance as to what your experience is, what value that you might bring ultimately. Obviously, if you know somebody, ask them for introduction. That's just an easy in. But oftentimes, a simple ask is enough, because believe me, most people are not asking. And if you want to get into sales, you have to get good at asking.
Yes, very much so. And good at taking a no and turning it around to a yes.
Love that. Yeah, no's are often just temporary no's until you can turn it around. That's great. Daisy, thank you so much for all of your time in this conversation. I know we went a little bit over. I'm sharing my screen right now to reiterate the survey that Vadim just sent in the chat. Because again, folks, we the only way we can continue offering these programs and making them valuable to you is if we hear from you and know what it is that you're looking for. So again, Daisy, I really appreciate your time and sharing everything and being so open about your own career and about stories that you've experienced throughout your career. It's been really helpful. And I already have people PMing me, sending me messages asking for the recording because they want to be able to review it. So thank you so much, Daisy. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me. I was honored to be here. Thank you.
Of course. Folks, again, please fill out that survey because that's the only way we know that you attended, and we'll be able to send you the recording and the notes for this event. Actually, a few folks also asked questions about, are there going to be certifications that we offer or anything else that we offer? And we are using the feedback that you're giving us in these surveys. Also, of course, you can actually email us at info@school16.co. Vadim and I look at every single email that comes in. Based on that feedback, we are creating programs that are going to give you more than just what you get from these sessions, which are already amazing, but these are once per week sessions. They're live for a reason because we think there's much more value when they're live, but we're going to be creating programs that are specific to these different verticals. There's a reason why we're doing a lot of different ones. We did tech recruiting last week, sales this week, product next week. We're going to be folks coming in talking about engineering and other different types of roles in tech. We want you to get exposure about the different types of roles that are available to you so you can come to your own decision about what it is that you want to learn. And then over time, we're going to be rolling out specific programs where you can be in a smaller room, maybe of 5-10 people with someone like Daisy so you can learn more intimately from her, and then start getting some of that experience, doing projects so you can start to get experience like Vadim did when he was getting in sales, or like Daisy did when she was getting in sales. So we're happy to offer that to you. But again, we can only do that when we hear from you. So folks, thank you so much for joining in our second session here at School 16. We'll be back next Wednesday again at 6 p.m. Eastern. If you have any questions for us, email us at info@school16.co if you didn't get a chance to ask a question here. And again, we thank you for joining us. And Daisy, thanks so much for giving your time today.
Thank you, everyone.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. We really appreciate everybody joining. See you next week.
Bye-bye.